looking pretty good. And then Terry McLaurin comes out of the game, toe injury. It's diagnosed as turf toe, x-rays negative, but depending on the severity of it, it either puts the beginning of his season in jeopardy or just a general one of those nagging injuries. I'm not saying that's worse than one that's like, hey, you're out 8 weeks, but the nagging injury, 17-game schedule, that could pop up. And that is huge for this Washington team because Howell was looking really good in the pass game. A lot of production out of Jahan Dotson, and they've got some weapons when Terry McLaurin is sitting there as the number one wide receiver, and that could be an issue here.
Yeah, and anytime you hear, turf toe, it's one of those injuries that feels like it tends to linger quite a while. So definitely not good. A little bit of a concern there for Washington. But overall, Sam Howell looks quite impressive. With the one caveat / exception that he's still a sack magnet. Sacks just seem to find him. It's either plays where he sort of invites trouble. There was one ridiculous play where he's trying to run around the backfield. It just keeps backing up and back. Those plays that young quarterbacks tend to make where they keep just losing more and more ground and then eventually give up and you've now lost 15 when it should have been 7 or whatever. He had one of those. There was a blown protection, which actually not a blown protection, a free runner that shouldn't have been there because they had the bodies to pick it up, but the protection was not called to pick it up. I don't know if that's on Sam Howell or if that's on the blockers themselves, but it feels like a high-level quarterback needs to see that coming, and he had no idea until he was blindsided by the guy. So I'm sort of quietly optimistic that I think Sam Howell overall is going to look like quite a good quarterback, but that's a big negative part of his game right now, where even if he looks good, he's chewing up a giant chunk of negative plays with those sacks.
Yeah, and that might not pair well with the offensive line. I know we already previewed the NFC East and the Washington Commanders, but their offensive line this year has been, the talk of Washington camp, and is it good enough? Are there improvements to still be made there? Charles Leno at left tackle, who we've always said is your dead smack average offensive tackle, which I think is a valuable position, but sometimes when you run up against better players, it's trouble. Andrew Wiley at right tackle, kind of similar. They're bringing him in. He had a 62 pass block grade last year. Sadiq Charles, scheduled to play left guard. He had a 29 pass blocking grade last year. So there are going to be some questions up front for Washington if they can at least be average there, though. And if Terry McLaurin's healthy, to go with Dotson, Curtis Samuel, De'Ami Brown had a nice touchdown the other day. I mean, I like the pass catchers there. But it's a lot of those what ifs, making sure that if Howell's going to invite pressure, that's going to look even worse if the offensive line is, below average as well.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't look like an offensive line that's in a tremendously good shape either, which is not going to help with that tendency of Sam Howell to have issues with pressure.
Howell, in particular, I do believe just watching him this year, a guy that only started one game last year, was a 5th-round pick, former projected first rounder for whatever that's worth. Watching guys like him, watching guys like Desmond Ridder, who were mid-round picks, that teams have said, we're rolling with these guys. Or even a Jordan Love in a slightly different situation, a guy that sat there and had to wait for 3 years, former first-rounder. To me, those are some of the more intriguing storylines, though, for the season, seeing these unproven quarterbacks who have a little bit of experience under their belt, and then just seeing like a team, Washington specifically didn't go get somebody. Atlanta specifically didn't go get somebody. And of course, Green Bay said, Jordan Love, you're our guy, post Aaron Rodgers here.
Yeah, I mean, the Ridder thing, Ridder's a high enough pick where those guys do get a shot sometimes. The Sam Howell one, though, is really intriguing because 5th-round picks just do not get given starting opportunities. And by that, I mean, like you said, they said very early in the offseason, Sam Howell's the guy, essentially. It seemed completely nonsensical. It sounded like nonsense at the time, where when they were interviewing offensive coordinator candidates, they were basically telling them, Sam Howell's the guy. So give me what you got. What's your plan to make this work, understanding that this is going to be the situation? We're not going to go draft a guy. We're not going to go, bring somebody in. You need to tailor an offense to this dude, this 5th-round pick from a year ago. It sounded crazy at the time, and then the more the offseason went through, the more it was pretty clear that does appear to be what they're going with. Jacoby Brissett being signed, I think, was really just a rubber stamp on that. Great idea. You bring in Jacoby Brissett as a really good backup. Nobody brings in Jacoby Brissett with the idea that he's the starter. So that was the signal that the Sam Howell thing is real. They're going to give him every opportunity to start. And, then they've gone ahead and absolutely followed through on that and named him the starter. But that, as a concept, almost never exists anymore. This idea of taking this 5th round pick and voluntarily deciding he's going to be the starter going forward, having seen basically nothing from him. Preseason a year ago, and then 1 game at the ass end of the season, enough to declare that they're going to be going with him. And then you've got the further sort of complicating element of it that, yes, he was a 5th round pick. Nobody's entirely sure why. Okay, it was a bad quarterback draft class, but nobody was looking at that group saying, you're going to get Desmond Ridder or whoever. These guys are going to be 3rd round picks, which itself was like a round or 2 lower than people were expecting them to go.
For sure.
They're going to be 3rd round picks. And Howell is the guy who's going to fall to the 5th, to deep into day 3. You go back a year ago and people were talking about him, or a year previous to the draft, people were talking about him as not just a 1st rounder, but maybe the number 1 overall pick. So he has tools, which is something you don't necessarily see in typical 5th round picks. It's just, I've been fascinated from day one to see what materializes out of giving a guy like him the chance.